Well, hello again, everybody. This is Rob Godlewski, your host today for the Think Small podcast. And today our guest is Simon Kaye. Simon is the president and CEO of Jaguar Freight Services. Simon, it's a pleasure to see you today.
Thanks, Rob. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, good. I am as well. It's an incredible story you have. So let's get started. Tell me about how you kind of got into this, freight management business and leading up to Jaguar itself, and give us a detail about what services and solutions that Jaguar offers its customers.
Sure, happy to do so. My family's been in transportation for generations. My grandfather was a trucker in the UK. My father left school at an early age to join him. They had various businesses, including UK domestic trucking, European trucking. They then got involved in what we refer to as short sea shipping in the UK, which is shipping from the UK to mainland Europe. They then got involved in deep sea shipping. They actually, at some point in the 70s, ran their own shipping line, which was actually conventional cargo, non-containerized cargo. And then I joined what was a freight forwarding business in the early 80s. Worked in what was a family business for a number of years. And then in 1993, there was a pretty large family split. It was pretty horrendous at the time, although when you talk to people afterwards, it's not an uncommon story. And myself and my father branched off and started Jaguar Freight in 1993. I was living in New York at the time. He was in London. We opened offices in both places, and then I went back to the UK to help him build and grow the business.
Wow. So you literally have been in this, freight and shipping and trucking has been in your blood since you were a child.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Although ironically, I don't really like being on boats. But shipping and transportation very much runs through me. I say to everyone that I have two sons, but Jaguar is my third child, and I'm very
Yeah.
passionate about the business.
But being in the business since 1993, you have seen a lot. So tell us more about what the business really is, who your customers are, and the services you provide them.
Sure. So, when I started the business in 1993, I realized very, very quickly that we actually weren't in the shipping and transportation business. We were in the information business. And so in the early to mid 90s, in the days of dial-up, so I'm definitely dating myself, we developed our own, at that time, track and trace program that evolved over the years to become a full end-to-end supply chain management solution for our clients. Our clients are international manufacturers, brands, importers and exporters. We manage their international supply chain. So that is international ocean freight and air freight, primarily on three trade lanes, the Trans-Pacific, the Transatlantic, and Asia-Europe. It's what I refer to as the Golden Triangle. And we have somewhat of a niche in the cosmetics and health and beauty sector, although there are four or five other verticals that we focus and specialize on, including medical device, sports and outdoor living, home goods, food, and packaging. So that's sort of like a broad overview of our clients and what we do.
So mostly or entirely international shipping. Do you do any domestic shipping either in the US or in the UK?
We do some. It's limited. Probably, less than 5% of our business is domestic trucking. We
Wow.
do some cross-border Mexico and some cross-border Canada here in the US, and then we do some intra-Europe trucking as well in Europe. But the vast majority of our business is international ocean and air freight. I like to say that we bring it in the back door, and then others manage it and distribute it domestically and take it out through the front door.
Sure, sure. So tell me, Simon, since you've been in the business since 1993, I'm sure you've seen many different cycles of business, right? Times when business was ramping up and you could barely take stock of how fast the growth was, but also probably some times of either plateauing sales, plateauing business, or even contraction. So let's talk about that, the latter first, right? When there were times of business contraction, how did you manage that from a not only from an operational standpoint, but from a human side as well?
Um, we're a non-asset based company. So we don't own trucks and warehouses. We certainly don't own ships and planes. Um, we are very much a human organization. We have what I like to consider a perfect balance between, great people and great systems. But that gives us a lot of flexibility, and allows us to manage resources effectively. And we now operate a completely distributed workforce. So pre-COVID, we had offices. I used to have offices in London, Paris, Hong Kong, Shenzhen, and New York. We actually now have offices nowhere and operate a completely
Hmm.
distributed workforce. So that gives
So
us
distributed workforce meaning remote workforce.
correct, correct. So I
Gotcha.
operate what I refer to as a WFA model, a work from anywhere model,
Hmm.
which again gives us tremendous flexibility. It also gives flexibility to our staff and employees, allows them to pick up and move around, as many of them have done over the last 5, 6, 7 years. Most recently, to move because of personal circumstances or whatever the case may be. It means they don't have to find a new job, and we don't have to backfill them. So it allows us to hire from anywhere, not within a commuting distance of a physical office, and also allows them to have the flexibility to move around. So, I've had staff in New York who are now currently in Texas and Florida. I've hired people that were in when I hired them were in Ohio. They're now in Maryland. I actually have someone who was living in North Carolina, and he now lives in Chile.
Hmm.
So it gives us a lot of flexibility, and that sort of like allows us to manage resources really well, also. But you're right. There's been a tremendous amount of ups and downs, peaks and troughs over the years. Most notably, recently, COVID was sort of like a real pivotal point for a lot of businesses. Since then, we've really continued in what I refer to as a continuous cycle of supply chain disruption. So, you've had the Ukraine-Russia war, you've had the Israel-Gaza war, which affected the Suez Canal. We have tariffs currently adding, more chaos to supply chains. So there's just this constant shift in needs, but with a flexible workforce that allows us to balance things, relatively easily.
That's good. So have you always had this distributed workforce or remote workforce model, or was that something that you migrated to over the years?
Yeah, so it's something we migrated to. As I
Okay,
said, I used to have offices in London, Paris, Hong Kong, Shenzhen, New York, and
that's right.
Philadelphia. Um, because we're non-asset based, I started closing the offices probably around 2010. Um,
Way before COVID.
Way before COVID. In 2014, I closed the London office. And all of these offices were sort of like control towers for their regions. I closed the London office and actually moved the European operations to New York. And I had
Hmm.
European staff working European hours in our New York office, voice over IP numbers across Europe. So you called a London, Paris, Rome number, it rang in New York, European staff answered the phone, and it worked really well. Although, I had people coming into the office at 2 o'clock in the morning, East Coast time, and I had to kick them out at around midday. And then I started getting them to work from home, and it worked really well. So I was thinking, well, if we can manage business 3,000 miles away from New York. Surely the US business can do the same domestically. And I started having the US staff working remotely. So pre-COVID, um, everyone was working 2, 3 days a week from home. Our systems have always been in the clouds. I often joke that our systems were in the cloud before we even knew what the cloud was called.
I
Um,
was going to say the same thing, Simon. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, when COVID hit and I sent everyone home March 12th, 2020, which was supposed to be for a couple of weeks, we all know how that turned
Hmm.
out. It worked so well for us that I announced to the team very early in COVID in July 2020 that we would never return to the office, and we haven't. And we remain now a completely distributed workforce. We've hired remotely. We have an incredibly high employee retention rate. And I put that down to culture. I'm a big believer that culture is the most important thing for any business.
I can't disagree. There's an old phrase in business or axiom that says culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah, I
And
think attributed to Peter Drucker, right?
there you go. Yes, Peter Drucker. And I fully subscribe to that statement.
Yeah, yeah,
I've
I do too. I think with a good business but a toxic culture, things aren't going to go well. And a pretty average business but with a really good culture, um, they're probably going to succeed and punch above their weight. And I think culture really is a force multiplier in any business.
So let's dig into that a little bit, Simon. If it's so important to you and your business, and obviously to your employees, tell me more about the culture at Jaguar Freight Services.
Sure. So, I think it's a little bit of a cliche, but we really operate like a family group. So we're very connected with one another. There are a number of things that I do to keep culture strong. Um, so we are completely distributed, but I bring everyone together twice a year, once for a holiday party with their partners in January, and then in the middle of the year for a 2-day team building event that includes charity work. So last year
That's
we
great.
volunteered at the Ronald McDonald House locally here on Long Island. Previously, we've done a house build for Habitat for Humanity. We've worked with Feeding America. So everything is about giving back and both team and giving back. So that sort of like really reinforces our culture. And then sort of like at a like a lower level, if you will, but equally valuable. Every week we bookends the week with two really important meetings. At the beginning of the week, we have an all company meeting where we share KPIs and numbers from the previous week. So everyone knows how well the business is doing, or where the wins are, where the challenges are, and they feel part of it. And I'm fairly transparent with our numbers. As one of my staff once said to me, transparent information is inspiration.
Mhm.
And so we give a lot of information out to the client, to the customers, sorry, to the employees.
Sure.
Um, and then at the end of the week, we have what I call a rose and thorn session. And again,
Huh.
everyone comes together and we share a positive and a negative, or could be multiple positives and negatives, so roses and thorns, of our previous week. And that can be personal and often is very personal, or business. And it allows people to hear from their colleagues that they wouldn't ordinarily interact with during the course of the week because they're in different departments. We don't have a physical office, so they wouldn't necessarily be communicating with them. So it allows everyone to hear everyone else and understand what's going on in their lives. So that's that really reinforces the culture. And then I do a small thing for everyone for their birthdays. Everyone gets a birthday PTO, so everyone gets the day off on their birthday. And then for their birthdays and for their what we call Jaguarversaries, what their business anniversary, they get a handwritten card from me with a scratch card in it. So maybe they'll walk off as a millionaire and sail off into the sunset at some point. But those are some of the things that I do to sort of like keep the culture strong and keep everyone connected.
That's good. I love the concept of a rose and thorn meeting at the end of the week because it's kind of like letting that pressure from the week kind of wash off of you in a safe environment, right?
Right, you're right. So there's a
Yeah,
lot of
it's
psychological safety within the business, and you would be amazed at how personal and you know heart wrenching in some instances people share
mm,
what's going on in their lives. And I think that goes to how safe they feel within the organization and how connected they feel with everybody. So it really is. I have to say, when I sit in on the meetings, I often host it. Although I like to allow different people to host the meeting,
mm.
but it really is quite emotional sometimes to hear from people, positive and negative. So yeah, we enjoy
Sure,
that.
that's great. Again, I congratulate you on your culture, and obviously, what you said, you have a very high retention rate for employees, so it's obviously working.
Yeah, I think so I think that goes hand in glove with a very high client retention rate as well. I'm a big believer in, I think it was Sir Richard Branson who said if you take care of your employees, they'll take care of your customers. Uh,
Absolutely.
and I sort of grew up, in an old school mentality of like the customer's always right, the customer's number one. And my thinking has evolved over the years to be really the employees number one. And you
Mm.
take care of the employees, you treat them well, you support them, and they will, run through walls for you and your customers.
Simon, I wouldn't be surprised when this podcast airs that you'll have an influx of applications.
Maybe.
So let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about periods of rapid growth and expansion. As a business leader, that's exciting and it's great to be adding more resources and adding more people to execute that new business. But it does bring in some unique set of challenges. So talk to me about a period in the company's history when you had a rapid expansion of growth and revenue and how you managed and navigated the business through that.
Sure. Yeah. So I think probably I'm going to circle back to COVID because that was sort of like a
Mm,
really interesting period in more ways than one. Um, but we sort of like got an early glimpse of COVID in December 2019, January 2020.
yeah.
There were like very few bookings and shippings coming out of Asia, coming out of China, and we're like, what? Normally there's a rush before Chinese New Year. It was like, what's going on here? This is all very quiet. There's some, we're a little bit of canaries in the coal mine, quite frankly, our industry with regards to just the global economy. And we were like, what's going on? And we were getting somewhat concerned. In March, as I said, we closed the office and the US sort of caught up with and Western Europe with what was going on with regards to COVID. And we started putting disaster plans in place
Mm,
because volumes were tanking, and then suddenly everything took off because everyone was at home, everyone was ordering online, and there was
that's
just
true.
an enormous uptick in demand. Not just for consumer goods, but obviously for PPE at the time. So
Of
masks and
course.
gloves and everything like that. And there were airline charters being arranged and huge volumes of freight moving. And we had an incredible growth period through 2021 for a 2 year period. And I won't lie, difficult to manage just an explosive growth like that. We had people working late at night, all the hours that God sends in order to arrange freight and to to manage the volumes that were coming in. It was really sort of like inbound sales. We had to do no outbound sales. It was like freight was just coming our way. So it was, very positive from a revenue and profit perspective, but from a sort of like management of both resources and execution of service, a real challenge. We were able to hire remotely. We were set up for remote work. It was very easy for us, but definitely very challenging. And I can't say that it was an easy period, but I think going back to what I was saying before with regards to culture, everyone pitched in, top to
Mm,
bottom, everyone helped. And put in the extra hours, put in the extra work. One of the things that we implemented, and again, this goes back to culture again, during COVID, is like we introduced what we call a mental health day for everyone, which they get six
mm.
a year. So every second month on a Friday, they get a mental health day to sort of like just decompress from what at the time in COVID, from just like the sheer volume of work and the extended
Sure.
hours. And we just continued that on now. I mean, that continues to this day at Jaguar. Everyone gets a mental health, 6 mental health days a year. So
Simon, that must be your European influence over managing a team. I'm being serious, managing a team, because that's incredibly generous for for especially a North American employee. Getting six basically free days a year on top of your normal vacation is incredibly generous, and I'm sure that that's a big part of your culture and a big part of the reason you don't have high turnover.
yeah, I mean, it's well, I see it as a two-way street, right?
Yeah,
Again,
yeah,
I support them and they support. We are a people business. We're a non-asset based company,
right,
and so my most valuable asset is my employees. And if I don't take care of them, what am I doing?
right.
So they're the most important part of the business. They deliver the service. They are the face of the business. And so I would be foolish not to, quite frankly. And maybe it is my European upbringing. Who knows? I have to tell you, Rob, that I sort of like I hear a lot of people. I'm part of a variety of number of different business groups, and I hear people complaining, "Oh, I can't keep staff, and I've got a revolving door at the front of my office, and people aren't inspired, and I can't get the best out of them." And I have to tell you, I find it somewhat frustrating because I believe it's a very, very simple equation. Pay people well, treat them well, they'll turn up for you.
Yeah,
It's really a very, very simple equation in my mind.
right.
So that's my philosophy.
Well, it obviously is working for you, so keep it up, my friend.
Thank you.
So during that period, right, you were trying to ramp up operations as quickly as you could. Obviously, the business shifted from a B2B to more of a consumer-oriented business, but to you, it didn't really matter because freight is freight, essentially. But
Yeah.
a lot of businesses in that time period, I was working with, clients that were having a real struggle with actually finding good talent. Did you suffer the same, or were you able to hire the people you needed to get the job done?
Yeah, it's a good question because I think historically, over the years, and I've been doing this for 33 plus years now. Historically, it's been very hit and miss as far as recruitment is concerned, and often the
Mm,
people I thought I was hiring weren't the people who turned up to the job. But over the years, we've sort of like evolved our process, and we actually have a very elongated recruiting process to try and minimize the risk for both us and the future candidate, that we're right for them and they're right for us. So we have multiple rounds over a number of months of in order to recruit someone through various different departments and different levels within the company, to ensure that we really do give ourselves the best chance of hiring the right people that are both capable and competent to do the job, but also, and I keep coming back to it, Rob, also a good culture fit. And it's not just fitting our culture, but adding to our culture as well.
Mm.
Um, and so that's something I think we've become much, much better at. And I have to tell you, through COVID, we hired some amazing people. It took us months through this interview process. We hired some amazing people who, continue to be with us today. And glad that we finally sort of like found the mechanism that works for us because historically it didn't work very well.
So when you started with your father, correct, in 1993,
Yeah.
how many employees did you start with? And what's the employee count now?
Sure. So we had it was myself, my father, one operations person, and a bookkeeper in London, and I had two people in our New York office, and that was the entire organization. So as I said, today we're distributed. We still have a relatively small organization because I'm a big believer in great people paired with great systems and processes, and not a cast of thousands. So we punch considerably above our weight for our size, but we are 30 full-time employees,
Oh, okay.
and we also have a back office staff of about 12 in the Philippines. So so we're still a relatively small organization, uh,
Yeah.
and I put that down to, as I said, great people and great technology. We've always leaned into technology. Technology has always been a foundational part of our business. And I think, with AI the way that it is, and what it's bringing to industry, I don't see headcount growing considerably. I see us using AI to do more effectively, more efficiently, but not for it to replace people, for it to enhance the jobs that they're doing.
I love that you said that, Simon. And one of our other guests on this podcast recently told me that people shouldn't be worried about AI. AI itself is not going to replace you, but people who know AI will.
Yeah,
And
I've heard that a lot, and I think that there is certainly truth to that in the short to medium term. I'm not sure
I
about the
agree.
long term.
Yeah.
And I was just at a show. I was talking to you, before we got on air. I was just at a trade show in Las Vegas that was purely technology in supply chain.
Okay.
A lot of talk regarding or around agentic AI, and AI agents, managing processes from beginning to end. And I
Hmm.
think I think that's probably coming, and I think that there is concern. I have concerns for the workforce in general, and what jobs are going to be left, and what sort of society we're going to have. I think that's probably a bigger, more philosophical conversation, but I definitely have concerns about the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay. It's interesting. There's a number of folks on this podcast that have a pretty optimistic viewpoint of the long term. They really do believe that AI is going to be a net add of employees in the workforce. I think there's going to be some flushing out of resources and level setting, if you will. But I guess I'm one of those optimistic blokes who like to like to think that it's going to be better. It's a major industrial revolution. It's the third of three that we've seen in our recent lifetime, and every time before this, employment has expanded.
Yeah, I think that is definitely true. I have a sense that this is different.
Okay.
Um, I very much hope that I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But and look, we're embracing it, and we're
Yeah,
going to,
obviously.
yeah, and we're going to we have and we will continue to implement AI tools to enhance what we're doing. Um, Philosophically, where this leads us, it's an open question as far as I'm concerned.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you're leaning in, and clearly you've managed the business to really leverage your technology and leverage your culture in keeping good people to reduce that employee turnover to leverage the output per employee. So you don't need to keep adding people to achieve your growth. And I think that's
Right.
important. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. Very,
So,
very, very much so.
Simon, what does the next, say, 3 to 5 years look like for Jaguar Freight Services?
Continue growth and expansion. We have what I refer to as a BHAG, which is our big, hairy, audacious goal.
I
So,
love BHAGs.
okay. So we're looking to grow the company 10x over the next 10 years. So it's
Wow.
pretty big and hairy. Um, yeah, but that is, I call that 10x to the power of three. So what does that mean? So firstly, 10x as far as bottom line, not top line. The bottom line
Oh,
is
okay.
far more important than the top line. You need the top line to drive the bottom line for sure.
Right.
But right, the as the saying goes, sales is vanity, but profit is sanity. And so we're focused on the bottom line. It actually continues
Never,
on.
you can never take revenue to the bank, right?
Right, cash flow is reality.
That's right.
Yeah, so 10x as far as profit is concerned, and then I said to the power of three, so that's one. The second is 10-year average tenure of employee, and 10-year average tenure of clients. So that's a harder one because we keep adding new clients, and so the average
Oh,
keeps
sure.
shifting. But we have clients for over 20 years. So that's our goal, and that's why it's a BHAG. We may not necessarily meet all of those targets, but we have targets to shoot for, and that's what we're moving towards.
So does that involve, expanding services within your current client base, or potentially new clients with the routes you're currently serving, or what does that really entail?
Sure. So it definitely includes expanding our client or the verticals that we service. So I mentioned
Okay.
before that we have certain verticals. So we're going to expand
Right.
verticals. We're also going to expand offerings with regards to trade lanes rather than specific services. As I said before, I've been in the business 33 years, so that means I've made a lot of mistakes over the years, Rob. And this may be the Englishman in me, is that I feel the only place you learn is when you fail. So I failed a lot. Although the so we say in England we're the best losers in the world. Um, but so I think that failure is where I've made all my learnings, and when I look back, the places where I failed are when I took my eye off the ball and I chased shiny baubles that looked like they were interesting and they were going to be maybe quick wins or whatever, but they weren't our core competence. And so I'm very much now focused on narrow and deep. And so it probably will mean expansion of trade lanes rather than specific expansion of services.
Services.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And I've talked to some other folks on this podcast that echo the same sentiment. Um, and that focus is more important than thinking you can sell everything to everybody, right?
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's very wise. That's a heck of a b hack. I got to hand it to you.
Yes, it is. It is, and but shoot big. What is the American
Right.
expression? Go big or go home. So
That's right.
so
That's
we're
right.
going big.
Well, Simon, if there's any words of advice or encouragement or anything you can share with our podcast audience, this is your chance. What would you like to say to our audience about your journey in business so far with Jaguar Freight Services?
I think, the thing I would say, and it's sort of almost the last thing that I did say, is sort of like know what you're good at, focus on it, and get committed to it. Don't get distracted by, get rich quick schemes or whatever may feel shiny or distracting, whatever. Focus on your core competencies, your business. As I said, I'm a big believer in narrow and deep, and show up as the professional. Show up as the
Mhm.
person in the room that sort of like understands their role, their industry, and be someone that people want to talk to, want to engage with because they are professional and they are industry experts.
Wow. That's fantastic advice. I certainly concur and agree with that sentiment about business and business growth. So very wise words indeed. Um,
Thank you.
Simon Kaye, President and CEO with Jaguar Freight Services. Thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Rob. I really enjoyed chatting with you.